Mia stood at the edge of the graveyard, her heart pounding as she clutched a single white lily in her hand. The wind whispered through the trees, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the small, weathered headstone in the distance. It had been months since she last visited, but today felt different. Today she needed to be here. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her feet crunching against the dry leaves. The graveyard was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When she reached the grave, she knelt down and placed the lily gently on the ground. Her fingers traced the letters carved into the stone. Beloved Mother, forever in our hearts. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. I miss you, she whispered, her voice trembling. Every day I miss you. For a moment there was only silence. Then out of nowhere, a soft, familiar voice broke through the stillness. Mia! Her head snapped up and her breath caught in her throat. It was her mother's voice, clear, warm, and unmistakable. Mia's heart raced as she looked around, but there was no one there. Just the graveyard, the trees, and the wind. Mom, she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that you? The voice came again, gentle and soothing. I'm here, Mia. I've always been here. Mia's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know if she was dreaming or if this was real, but in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was the sound of her mother's voice, a voice she thought she'd never hear again. Mia sat frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the grave. The voice had faded, but its echo lingered in her mind, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, but her heart refused to slow down. Mom, she whispered again, her voice cracking. If you're really here, please say something, anything. For a moment there was nothing, just the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Mia's shoulders slumped, and she began to wonder if she had imagined it all. Maybe it was just her grief playing tricks on her. Maybe she had wanted to hear her mother's voice so badly that her mind had created it. But then the voice returned, softer this time, almost like a sigh. Mia, my sweet girl, you don't have to be afraid. Her eyes flew open, and she scanned the area again. Still, no one was there. Yet the voice felt so real, so close, as if her mother were standing right beside her. Mia's chest tightened, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold on to the feeling. Why can't I see you? She asked, her voice trembling. The voice paused, as if considering her question. Some things are felt, not seen, it replied gently. But I'm here, Mia. I've never left you. Tears streamed down Mia's face as she leaned forward, resting her forehead against the cool stone. I don't know what to do without you, she admitted, her voice breaking. Everything feels so empty, so wrong. Oh, Mia, the voice said, filled with so much love it made her chest ache. You're stronger than you think. You always have been. And you're not alone. I'm with you, even if you can't see me. Mia swallowed hard, her fingers digging into the grass beneath her. But it hurts so much, she whispered. I don't know how to make it stop. The pain doesn't go away, the voice replied softly, but it changes. It becomes a part of you, and you learn to carry it. And one day, you'll find that it doesn't weigh you down as much as it used to. Mia closed her eyes again, letting the words sink in. For the first time in months, she felt a small flicker of hope. It was faint, but it was there, like a tiny light breaking through the darkness. What do I do now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Live, the voice said simply. Live for me, live for yourself, and when you're ready, help others who feel the way you do now. You have so much love to give, Mia. Don't let it go to waste. Mia nodded slowly, her tears slowing as she absorbed her mother's words. She didn't know how, but she felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. It wasn't the end of her grief, but it was a beginning, a step forward. Mia stayed by the grave for what felt like hours, listening to the silence and occasionally hearing her mother's voice. Each time it spoke, it felt like a balm to her aching heart. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that resonated deep within her. By the time she stood up to leave, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the graveyard. As she walked home, Her mind raced with thoughts and emotions. Her mother's voice had given her comfort, but it had also sparked something else, a sense of purpose. The idea of helping others who were grieving, as her mother had suggested, lingered in her mind. She didn't know how to start, but she knew she had to try. When she got home, she sat down at her desk and pulled out a notebook. She stared at the blank page for a long time, her pen hovering over the paper. Finally, she began to write. At first, the words were messy and disjointed, but as she kept going, they started to flow more easily. She wrote about her mother, about the pain of losing her, and about the strange, comforting experience at the graveyard. She wrote about how she wanted to help others who were going through the same thing. By the time she finished, the page was filled with her thoughts and ideas. She read it over, her heart pounding. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. She knew she couldn't do this alone, though. She needed help. The next day, Mia went to her school counselor, Mrs. Thompson. She had always been kind and understanding, and Mia felt like she could trust her. When she walked into Mrs. Thompson's office, the counselor looked up and smiled. "Mia, it's good to see you," Mrs. Thompson said warmly. "What can I do for you?" Mia hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. I I want to start a support group," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "for kids who've lost someone, like me." Mrs. Thompson's expression softened, and she nodded. "That's a wonderful idea, Mia. Tell me more." Mia explained her plan, her words tumbling out in a rush. She talked about how she wanted to create a safe space where kids could share their feelings and support each other. She talked about how she didn't want anyone to feel as alone as she had. Mrs. Thompson listened carefully, her eyes filled with compassion. When Mia finished, she smiled. "I think that's a beautiful idea, Mia, and I'd be happy to help you get started. We can talk to the principal and see about setting something up." Mia felt a surge of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, thank you," Mrs. Thompson replied. "It takes a lot of courage to do something like this. I'm proud of you." Mia left the office feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. The following week, Mia stood in front of a small group of students in a classroom after school. The room was quiet, the air thick with tension. She could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the way they fidgeted in their seats or avoided looking at her directly. They were all there for the same reason: loss. But that didn't make it any easier to start. Mia took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edges of the podium. "Hi," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy. I I lost my mom a while ago, and it's been really hard. I felt so alone, like no one understood what I was going through. That's why I wanted to start this group, so we can all be here for each other." She paused, glancing around the room. A few heads nodded, and she saw a flicker of recognition in their eyes. It gave her the courage to continue. "This is a safe space," she said. "You can share as much or as little as you want. There's no right or wrong way to feel. We're all just here to listen and support each other." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched on, and Mia's heart began to race. What if no one wanted to talk? What if this was a mistake? Then a boy in the back raised his hand slightly. "Can I go first?" he asked hesitantly. Mia nodded, relief flooding through her. "Of course." The boy stood up, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I lost my dad last year," he said, his voice low but clear. "It was really sudden, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I still don't, really, but it helps to know I'm not the only one." As he spoke, others began to open up. One by one, they shared their stories of parents, siblings, friends. Some cried, others spoke with a quiet strength, but all of them were honest. Mia listened intently, her heart aching for each of them. She realized that while their stories were different, the pain they carried was the same. When the meeting ended, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The tension was still there, but it was softer, lighter. As the students filed out, a few of them stopped to thank Mia. "This was really helpful," one girl said, her eyes glistening with tears. "I didn't think talking about it would make a difference, but it did." Mia smiled, her own eyes filling with tears. "I'm glad," she said. "We'll meet again next week. You're not alone in this, okay?" The girl nodded, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of hope in her expression. Over the next few weeks, the support group became a regular part of Mia's life. Each meeting brought new stories, new tears, and new moments of connection. The group grew closer, bonding over their shared experiences and offering each other comfort and understanding. Mia found herself looking forward to the meetings, not just because she was helping others, but because they were helping her too. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, Mia stayed behind to clean up the classroom. As she stacked chairs and wiped down the tables, Mrs. Thompson walked in. "You've done an amazing thing here, Mia," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with pride. "This group has already made such a difference for so many students." Mia smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "It's helping me too," she admitted. "I didn't realize how much I needed it until we started." Mrs. Thompson nodded. "Grief is a heavy burden to carry alone. It's good that you're letting others share it with you." Mia thought about her mother's voice at the graveyard, about the words that had given her the courage to start this group. "I just wish I could do more," she said quietly. "There are so many people out there who are hurting. I feel like I'm only scratching the surface." "You're doing more than you realize," Mrs. Thompson replied. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impact. You've created a space where people feel safe to be vulnerable. That's not easy to do." Mia nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." As she left the school that night, Mia felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The pain of losing her mother was still there, but it didn't feel as overwhelming as it once had. She knew she still had a long way to go, but she was moving forward one step at a time. Months passed, and the support group continued to grow. Word spread through the school, and soon students who hadn't spoken up before began to join. Mia worked tirelessly to make sure everyone felt welcome, often staying late to prepare for meetings or talk to members one-on-one. She even started a small journal where she wrote down her thoughts and reflections, inspired by the stories she heard in the group. One day, as she was organizing materials for the next meeting, a girl named Emma approached her. Emma had only joined the group a few weeks ago, and she had been quiet during the sessions, often sitting in the corner with her arms crossed. But today, she looked different, softer, more open. "Mia," Emma said hesitantly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course," Mia replied, setting down the papers in her hands. "What's on your mind?" Emma took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room before settling on Mia. "I just wanted to say thank you for starting this group. I lost my brother last year, and I've been so angry about it. I didn't want to talk to anyone or let anyone in, but hearing everyone's stories, it made me realize I'm not the only one who feels this way, and it's okay to not be okay." Mia felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so glad you feel that way, Emma," she said, her voice gentle. "It's not easy to open up, but you're doing it. That takes a lot of courage." Emma nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I think I'm ready to share my story at the next meeting, if that's okay." Mia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's more than okay. We're all here to listen." As Emma walked away, Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was why she had started the group, to help people like Emma find their voice, to let them know they weren't alone. It wasn't about fixing everything or making the pain go away. It was about creating a space where people could heal, one small step at a time. The support group had become a cornerstone of the school community, and Mia's efforts didn't go unnoticed. One day, the principal called her into his office. Mia walked in nervously, unsure of what to expect. "Mia," the principal began, his tone warm and appreciative, "I've heard incredible things about the support group you've started. It's made a profound impact on so many students, and I wanted to personally thank you for your dedication." Mia blushed, shaking her head. "I didn't do it alone. Mrs. Thompson and the other members, they've all been a part of this." "Still," the principal said, smiling, "it was your initiative that brought this to life. And because of that, I'd like to offer you an opportunity. We're planning a school-wide event to honor loved ones who have passed away. It could be a way to bring the entire community together and celebrate their memories. Would you be willing to help organize it?" Mia's eyes widened. The idea of a larger event to honor those who were no longer here felt like the perfect way to expand what the support group had started. "I'd love to," she said, her voice filled with determination. Over the next few weeks, Mia threw herself into planning the event. She worked with teachers, students, and even parents to create a program that included music, speeches, and a memory wall where people could post photos and notes about their loved ones. The support group members helped too, sharing ideas and spreading the word. The day of the event arrived and the school auditorium was packed. Mia stood backstage, her heart pounding as she listened to the hum of the crowd. She glanced at the memory wall, now filled with photos and messages, and felt a surge of emotion. This was it, a way to honor her mother and so many others who had left their mark on the world. When it was her turn to speak, Mia walked onto the stage, her hands trembling slightly. She looked out at the sea of faces, some tearful, some smiling, and took a deep breath. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady. "We're here to remember the people we've lost, but also to celebrate the love they brought into our lives. Grief isn't something we can fix or erase, but it's something we can carry together. And in doing that, we keep their memories alive." As she spoke, she felt a familiar warmth, as if her mother were standing beside her, guiding her words. She shared her own story, her journey of loss and healing, and how the support group had helped her find her way. When she finished, the room erupted into applause, and Mia felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. After the event, as people mingled and shared stories, Mia stood by the memory wall, her eyes lingering on a photo of her mother. She reached out and touched the image, a soft smile on her lips. "I did it, Mom," she whispered. "I hope you're proud of me." In that moment, she felt a gentle breeze brush against her cheek, and she could have sworn she heard her mother's voice one last time. "I always am, Mia."
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.